Welcome to the Digital Determinants podcast, where we delve into the complex systemic reasons behind the presence of digital inequity and the challenges surrounding digital adoption within communities comprising generations from the Great Migration. This podcast will explore the impact of trust on digital participation, the implications of digital discrimination, and the unique challenges faced by descendants of the Great Migration in embracing digital technologies. Join us as we unravel the historical, social, and technological factors contributing to this phenomenon and explore potential solutions to bridge the digital divide and promote inclusive digital adoption. Hey, it's me, Kyla Williams-Tate, host of the Digital Determinants podcast. I want to thank everyone who has been tuning in and watching or listening to the past 6 episodes of this podcast. As I shared, I think in the last episode, it has been incredibly challenging for me to return to this space to quiet my mind in lieu of everything that has been happening in the federal administration, not just in the digital equity inclusion space, but all over the world. All of these programs and opportunities that support our work and support mankind is being challenged and dismantled, and there's a lot of pain and disappointment. There's a lot of resilience for sure, and I consider myself one of the many who are out here trying to be resilient. But it's been really hard to quiet my mind, to return to this space. And so I am thankful for my friends and my colleagues and peers who have been encouraging me to finish this thing up. And so I'm going to keep moving forward and get it done. I'm also so thankful to the Benton Institute for this fellowship opportunity. There are many deliverables that are required as a result of this fellowship opportunity, but one of mine was delivering 10 episodes of this podcast. So I endeavor to do that and will do that in the best ways that I can. So to the story for today. Today's episode is entitled Forgotten Networks, the Role of Libraries in the Great Migration and Eliminating the Digital Divide. Now, libraries have always been a personal sanctuary for me. I'm a library kid. I grew up wandering the stacks of arms overflowing with books, finding wonder and belonging in those quiet corners of possibility. But my love for libraries is not without conflict. Not so long ago, people who looked like me faced incredible barriers to those very spaces. During the Great Migration, libraries reflected the same inequities shaping society, often turning Black patrons away and offering very limited resources in segregated spaces. It's a history of exclusion and perseverance, tangled with pain and resilience. And I'm not a big television person or a big movie person, but if I'm going to watch a television show or a movie, one that has a little bit of pain and a lot of resilience certainly is my genre of consumption from a media perspective. So this story is even that much more meaningful because it has all of the things that I like to pay attention to. But I see the evolution of libraries. There's something greater, there's something vital, there's something essential. Even though they had exclusionary pasts, they do stand as the backbone of digital inclusion, offering the tools and access that ensure equity in a digital first world is paramount and primary. So sharing these stories feels a bit like reckoning with the past and the celebration of transformation. So libraries have always been more than book depositories. They are spaces of education and culture and connection with the power to uplift entire communities. When you look from an economic development standpoint, a community development standpoint, when you look at a thriving community, they have a kick-ass library. It's part of the algorithm. So Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those lesser known chapters of libraries during the Great Migration. We'll explore the pivotal role that libraries played during that time, the work of some Black librarians, and expanded opportunities in the communities as more and more people migrated over to the North. And we'll talk a little bit about libraries now and how they are with us in the fight to close the digital divide. This is a story about enduring impact. It's historical, it's modern, it's the digital determinants way. So let's begin. The Great Migration, as y'all know, lasted from 1916 to 1970. There was two sort of phases of the Great Migration, and we saw millions of African Americans move from the racially oppressive South to cities in the North, the Midwest, and West. For many of those migrants, libraries became essential lifelines, just like they are today, as they provided much needed resources and opportunities. I've spoken in some previous episodes about the fact that when people migrated to the North, they arrived in these triage centers. Some of them were churches, but a lot of them were libraries. So the libraries have played an essential role in providing the space that was needed so that people who were coming into these communities as new residents could come someplace that was trusted, that was safe, that had representation of folks who were doing the work at the time in the community so that they can figure out what their next steps were. And that is just fascinating to me, that libraries were representative of the complexities of inequality, but also the necessity of settling in new places. That's just a fascinating storyline to me. So libraries in Chicago, which is where my research project is primarily situated, played an essential role in the Great Migration in several key ways. Cultural and educational access. So for many Black migrants, libraries were a gateway to self-improvement because it was filled with books that shared good information about how you could do things and learn things and be things. And even those books that were creative in nature and fiction, like dreaming and imagining the possibility of a different life or a new life or a new way of life, is really good for your emotional well-being. I don't think that we encourage our folks, adults folks especially, to dream enough. Even our elderly, like, dreaming is good for the soul. It's good for the body, it's good for the soul. So these library spaces provided access to books, newspapers, and magazines that many had been denied in the rural South. Libraries became tools for learning new skills, staying informed politically, and pursuing education outside of formal institutions. Because you gotta recognize that back in 1916, segregation was still a thing, and folks were being denied access to education, schools, universities. It was a challenging time for a Black person to try to better themselves. And so when people say things like, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps, I came here, I didn't have, all the things, and I was able to make it. But what color was your body in? Because depending upon what color your body was in, determined how much access or resources you were allowed to even have. I'm going to try not to get upset this episode. Back to my calm voice. It's my calm library speaking voice, okay? Libraries are also community spaces. They became the hubs for community activities, hosting events and lectures and programs that allowed Black residents to connect with one another. The Chicago Public Library system, with branches located in predominantly Black neighborhoods like on the South Side, provided a sense of belonging and offered intellectual and cultural enrichment. I said in a previous episode, I talked a little bit about the Southside YMCA being a place where a lot of Black intellectuals used to meet. And certainly they used to meet at the library too. So there's a good connection of how strategy and plans and books were written and developed to capture the Black story of the time and preserved in library spaces. So that's exciting. Libraries at the time, during the Great Migration and in Chicago, promoted Black literature and identity. Libraries began to stock books and materials by Black authors during the Harlem Renaissance, giving Black Chicagoans access to stories and ideas that reflected their own struggles and aspirations. Again, that dream space. These works gave voice to the community's identity and played a role in fostering a sense of empowerment. It also helped to foster political engagement. The libraries of Chicago, particularly on the South Side, became meeting spaces for leaders and writers and activists to exchange ideas. Newspapers like the Chicago Defender, which we've talked a lot about their role during this series, drew upon these resources to support the Great Migration and the fight for civil rights. Libraries helped spark intellectual and political movements that shaped the future of the community. Many of the movements and moments of the time that were sparked in libraries on the South Side of Chicago are still running in those libraries, and that is pretty significantly amazing. She really shows like the fortitude and resilience of the people of the time to ensure that those intellectual, political, cultural, educational moments were preserved. But while libraries provided those opportunities, they were also shaped again by the same systemic inequalities that defined so many public institutions at the time. While the libraries were agents of connection and opportunity, they also mirrored the racism of the time. So Black Chicagoans faced segregation, again, limited access to resources, and glaring gaps in representation within library collections. Even progressive branches often struggled to meet the needs of their Black patrons fully. Let me say that again. Even progressive branches of the libraries in Chicago and other places often struggled to meet the needs of their Black patrons fully. So if they don't have the same resources, they don't have the same access, they don't have the same opportunities, then how does society expect folks to just be the same? And that's intentional. They didn't intend for Black people to be seen as the same, to be seen as equal. And the best way to do that is through the restriction of access. So back then it was access to books and to education, and to periodicals and articles and other things. And today, that same restriction exists. It's the restriction to access to the internet because it's so unaffordable. Unaffordable is not affordable, okay? It's restriction to opportunity. It's restriction to resources that help to fund public institutions like libraries. And if you don't have enough staff, and if you don't have enough computers, and if you don't have enough resources, then those libraries, albeit still amazing in the ways that they are able to maintain and sustain themselves, it's still not providing the same kind of access that are happening in other places and spaces that are well resources, that have a great deal of support, that have all of the information and more and some inside of those buildings. So Black patrons often faced significant challenges accessing library services during the Great Migration. Despite the role as public institutions, libraries were deeply affected by the segregationist practices and systemic inequities of the time. And this is some of the ways that discrimination played out. So libraries in many cities were explicitly segregated or informally practiced segregation. So even if it wasn't like a formal thing, there was still informal practice of segregation. So Black patrons were often restricted to using underfunded branches in black neighborhoods. The Jim Crow laws in the South outright barred black residents from white libraries. Outright. They could not go in. Some communities didn't even have libraries. And let me tell you something. There are still communities that don't have libraries. I know everybody makes the assumption that every community has a library, whether it's a small one or a big one or a college one or some type of library. There are still communities across this nation that do not have a public library as part of their community ecosystem. So the communities that didn't have libraries for black residents at all left them really with no access until activists pushed for the creation of separate and often substandard facilities. Those libraries, as I've said before, often had inferior resources because they were underfunded. They had smaller collections. They had outdated materials, just like some of our libraries have outdated computers and outdated software programs because they don't have the funding to purchase those items and maintain and sustain those items. Fewer staff members. Does this story sound familiar? Some of our libraries in some of these same communities have fewer staff members, so there's not a lot of resources available, one-on-one resources available to support the patrons that come in needing help. Books and other resources that reflected black culture and history were commonly absent. Sounds familiar about what's happening today, and some of our books being removed from the library shelves and making it illegal to be able to have those books in schools. Sounds really familiar, doesn't it? So the absenteeism of those things further marginalized black patrons. There was discriminatory practices, in libraries. Even in cities that did not legally segregate libraries, black patrons frequently experienced informal discrimination. Staff members often ignored them or treated them poorly. Some libraries confined black patrons to specific sections of the library or required the use of a separate entrance. Think how that would make you feel. You show up at your local library ready to do whatever you're going to do up in there. And they look at you, and because you look like me, they tell you that you can't enter through the front door, that you have to enter through a separate door. Again, the resilience of black people. We got to talk more about that. The resilience of black people. The resilience of all people, let me be very clear. Resilience is not situated just in blackness. But because I'm talking about this very black story, the Great Migration, and the stuff that happened to black people during that time, the resilience of black people is just sitting heavy on my heart. The resilience of my own grandmother, leaving her 4 children in Mississippi and coming up here and being a maid in Evanston and working at the hospital and working in office buildings, 2 and 3 jobs so that she could get enough money so she could bring her children here. The resilience of black people. Ooh, that almost made me cry. Resistance to inclusion. Efforts to expand services for black communities were often met with resistance. So we have resilience because we had been met with a lot of resistance. So administrators opposing the hiring of black librarians, the establishment of new branches in black neighborhoods, and the inclusion of books by black authors in collections were often the mode in libraries during the Great Migration. Advocacy was required just to achieve a small incremental change. And we'll take it. We take all the successes. So advocacy was required so that we could have just some incremental change for black people as it pertains to their library experience. While Chicago's library system was officially open to all, Black patrons faced barriers in limited programming and unequal distribution of resources. Similarly, Detroit's library system was slow to respond to the growing needs of its Black population, necessitating organized campaigns to improve access. Despite these barriers, Black librarians and community leaders fought tirelessly for equitable access. Early pioneers like Virginia Proctor Powell Florence worked to bring representation and reform to the profession. Organizations such as the Urban League and the NAACP championed library equity campaigns advocating for more inclusive policies. Librarians' responses to the discrimination faced by Black patrons during the Great Migration, it varied widely, reflecting the broader societal tensions of the time. Some librarians upheld the discriminatory practices, either passively or actively, while others worked to challenge these inequities and advocate for greater inclusion. Now I would like to turn my attention to some trailblazing Black librarians. So, Black librarians played a pivotal role in challenging discriminatory practices from within the system, despite facing significant obstacles, because you know they were facing some obstacles. When systems are built against you and built to ensure you fail or have limitations, those are some big obstacles to have to fight against. So, despite facing those significant obstacles, these librarians work to make libraries more accessible and relevant to Black communities. Notable figures again include Virginia Proctor Powell Florence. That's a mouthful, but a beautiful name, a beautiful librarian who did a lot for Black folk. The first Black woman to earn a degree in library science. She paved the way for future generations of Black librarians. Charlamagne Hill Rollins. Now that sounds like a good name right there. Charlamagne Hill Rollins, a librarian in Chicago who became a leading advocate for children's literature that accurately represented African American experience. She also worked to expand library services for Black patrons. And then one of my favorite librarians, Margaret Burroughs, an artist, an educator, and librarian in Chicago who later co-founded the beautiful DuSable Museum of African American History. If you're ever in Chicago, please make sure that you make your way to the South Side and visit the DuSable Museum of African American History. It's a beautiful museum. Margaret Burroughs used her position to promote African American culture and history within the library system. These librarians advocated from within. They worked behind the scenes to push for change, whether they were curating collections on their own that reflected Black experiences, organizing community programs, or mentoring young people interested in library science. These Black librarians were helping to equitably offer an amazing library experience. Now, let's talk about the expanding role of libraries during the Great Migration, because despite the fact that there was still systemic injustice and segregation and racism and all of those other isms that existed during the time, libraries themselves were also evolving because they're the heart of community. So they themselves, as they were being challenged and figuring out how they could be helpful to their patrons, not just the Black ones, but all patrons, they evolved too. So during the Great Migration, transformation in libraries happened, not just in Chicago, but in cities across the North, the Midwest, and the West. Libraries in cities like Detroit, Cleveland, and Los Angeles played parallel roles in empowering Black communities through their stories, and they took unique shapes in those individual places. So let's talk about libraries in Detroit. Detroit welcomed large number of Black migrants due to its thriving auto industry. Many folks went right to Detroit so that they could work in those manufacturing plants for those automobile makers, and were able to earn good livings and be able to buy property and help to fortify a tax base in communities. So the story of Detroit is super important in this Great Migration story too. In Detroit, the libraries offered literary programs and access to reading materials, helping migrants to adapt to their new surroundings. But again, those libraries were underfunded and also mirrored some of the inequities that were happening in Chicago. Uh, During the Harlem Renaissance, which we mentioned earlier, Detroit libraries featured book clubs and lectures and other programs celebrating Black literature and history spurred by community activism. Let's go to Cleveland. Cleveland libraries were comparatively progressive with an official policy of open access for all. So Cleveland, come through Cleveland. They had a policy in their libraries, progressive, against the time, that there was open access for all. So branches like the Hugh branch played a key role in promoting African American culture through Black patrons pushing for more representative collections and programs. Libraries in Los Angeles, let's go over there to our friends to the west. Los Angeles became a growing destination during the second wave of the Great Migration. Because when you are from the South, which is primarily warm and probably just 2 seasons, I would say, maybe 2.5 seasons versus the 4 seasons that we experience up here in the North, during the second wave of the Great Migration, they had heard from the first wave people who said, it's cold up here. So many of them said, well, we're not going to go to Chicago. We're not going to go to Cleveland. We're not going to go to Detroit. We're not going to go to Philadelphia. We're going to go to Los Angeles because it's warmer. And we like the warmth down here in the South. So libraries in Los Angeles were cultural hubs too. The Central Avenue libraries reflected the vibrancy of LA's Black communities, hosting gatherings and cultural events. Literacy programs and vocational training were also introduced to support economic mobility. So here we start to see how libraries were the training places for jobs and helping to connect people to better economic opportunity. They're still doing that today. Across these cities, recurring themes emerged. Libraries not only provided access to education and culture, check, still doing that. They represented a battlefield where the fight for equitable resources, representation, and inclusion took place. And one can argue that that battle is still going on today, especially in lieu of the cuts that has occurred at the IMLS, especially in lieu of the resources that have been removed from libraries as a result of this federal government's policy priorities or the deprioritization of policies, depending upon how you look at it. So libraries are still fighting. They're in the modern fight for digital equity. I'm so happy and I'm so proud of our Illinois libraries, our state librarian, Alexis Janulius, who just recently announced a host of grants to libraries to help them with construction, to help them with technology, and to help them with programming. And then we in Cook County just made an announcement of our commitment to helping our local suburban Cook County libraries with some resources that's going to help them continue their fight for digital inclusion. So I'm really super proud to be in the role that I play in this work in Illinois, because we really are turning our focus to helping our libraries in such a great way. So again, libraries are in the modern fight for digital equity. They continue to build on their legacy of community service by addressing the critical modern challenge, the digital divide. So just as libraries once provided access to books and knowledge, they now provide internet access, technology training, and digital literacy programming to ensure marginalized communities don't get left behind in a digital-first world. Libraries have placed a crucial role in addressing the digital divide over time, evolving their services to meet the changing needs of communities. And here's a breakdown of some of their contributions. So access to technology. Libraries have provided free access to computers, the internet, and other digital tools, ensuring that individuals without personal resources can still connect to the digital world. And that's going to be even more important as people are losing their jobs and as people's economic status change and they can no longer afford a home-based internet subscription, and some of them are not going to be able to afford even to have a cell phone. When you have to make hard decisions in your household of how you survive when your resources change, often the internet and cell phone service are the things that have to go because you have to feed people, you have to house people, you have to keep your automobile going. So access to technology, I think, is going to be even more needed as our economic status changes, as more things are dismantled, as more resources are not available. People are going to increase their access to technology through the libraries. Libraries offer digital literacy programs. They offer workshops and one-on-one training through digital navigation to help people develop essential digital skills such as using email and navigating the internet and understanding software applications. I say often, as part of our Digital Equity Action Plan in Cook County, that libraries play a significant role in building confidence because it's a safe space. Like the environments that they created in those buildings, even the architecture of the buildings with how light enters into spaces, it just helps people feel safe. And if you feel like if you have a question, you can ask that question because they're a trusted resource. Libraries help us to bridge our economic gaps by offering free access to expensive technologies like printers, scanners, and high-speed internet. And libraries help to level the playing field for economically disadvantaged individuals and small businesses. Support for education and job seekers. Libraries provide that resource for online learning, job applications, resume buildings, empowering individuals to improve their education and career prospects. And they are community hubs. Libraries serve as inclusive spaces where people of all ages and backgrounds can gather, learn, and share knowledge, fostering a sense of community and collaboration. They are also helping to adapt to emerging technology. Over time, libraries have embraced new technologies such as 3D printing, virtual reality, coding programs, AI literacy to ensure that communities stay updated with the latest advancements. And then libraries also are advocates and policy influencers. Libraries continue to advocate for equitable access to digital resources and influence policies that promote digital inclusion. In essence, libraries have transformed from being these depositories of books, to dynamic centers of digital inclusion, continuously adapting to bridge the digital divide and empower community and residents. Libraries are also the preservation of culture. Oh my goodness, this is a good section of this podcast. Libraries have also become pioneers in preserving cultural history through digitization projects, ensuring that the voices of Black communities are not only remembered, but made accessible globally. Libraries have long been instrumental in preserving and promoting Black culture and the history of African American people by serving as the repositories of knowledge, community hubs, and platforms for cultural expressions. Here are some of the way that libraries help to preserve Black culture. They archive history. Libraries collect and preserve documents, books, photographs, and oral histories that reflect the African American experience, ensuring that those stories are not lost to time. For example, the Chicago Public Library is home to the Vivian G. Harsh Research Collection, which is the largest collection of African American history and literature in the Midwest. Many libraries actively promote works by Black authors and scholars, hosting events like book signings, lectures, and discussions to celebrate their contributions. Libraries do a lot of cultural programming. They organize exhibitions and workshops and events that highlight African American history, art, and culture, fostering awareness and appreciation. And not just during Black History Month, like all year round and throughout the year. There's so many opportunities to meet and greet and learn about a lot of Black authors and a lot of Black literature and research projects. Libraries are so key and instrumental for that. They also are key for community empowerment. Libraries in Black communities have been spaces for education, activism, and empowerment, especially during the Civil Rights Movement. But all libraries now, as they continue to champion equity, provide opportunity for cultural expression and community empowerment from the Black lens, from the Black voice. Even when I was visiting the library in Calgary, Canada, they had a section specific to Black voices, which I thought was amazing to see. Libraries are doing the thing, and that's why I continue to champion them and support them. They've evolved. Certainly, they were a product of the time during the Great Migration, but there's been a lot of evolution and a lot of good movement and momentum on behalf of African American people in this country. They also have a lot of specialized collections. So institutions like the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in New York and the African American Research Library and Cultural Center in Florida are dedicated to preserving and showcasing Black heritage. So we've talked a little bit about libraries in those major recipient cities such as Chicago, Detroit, and Los Angeles, and how they had a deep historical connection in fostering community empowerment and equitable access to resources. And again, we've talked about how the legacy of libraries has naturally transitioned and intentionally. So not just organically, but I think that there's been some good intention behind the library folk to modernize their role as key players in driving digital inclusion and adoption, especially within historically marginalized communities. What we know and what we have to continue to fight for is sustaining our libraries. How libraries are funded in this country, and even in my own communities in Cook County, it's challenging and it's complex. And I don't know that it necessarily helps to support the equitable opportunity that they have in being able to leverage their powers across municipalities and geography lines, and how they're able to work even more closely together to be more supportive to each other and to learn from each other. And that's what our program in Cook County that we are launching, our Digital Navigator Network, we are seeking to work with library to stand up a new model of sustainability around libraries. Because libraries essentially are digital navigators, like the libraries themselves are digital navigators. I know that we tend to talk about digital navigators as people, like individual people, but we are challenging that notion, and we see our libraries themselves as digital navigators. So our Digital Navigator Network is going to be a network of connected libraries with all of the things that they do on the inside. And we're trying to figure out how we sustain that over time so that they can continue to evolve, that they can continue to meet the needs of community members. Libraries are such amazing intermediaries. Every time I sit down and talk to a librarian or a staff member or a trustee, I learn so much, because they sit in community. So they see and they feel and they experience and they help and they support the needs of communities. So if you haven't had the opportunity to sit down with your local librarian, whether you're leading this work or not, you should go in there and talk to them. Bring them some coffee, a little snack, and talk to them about what they're seeing and experiencing in the community. You may learn something. No, you may not learn. You will learn something if you talk to your local librarian. So we've talked a little bit about the dismantling of some library systems and sustainabilities that the libraries need. So the dismantling of IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the clawing back of those grants, it's just particularly troubling. The IMLS has been a vital lifeline for libraries across the country, funding innovative programs and offering critical financial support to help libraries meet the diverse needs of communities. The loss of this institution or the clawing back of previously granted funds represents not only a financial blow, but also a dismantling of the very support systems that underpins library innovation. When grants are taken away or fail to materialize, libraries are left scrambling to provide essential services. These grants have often been used to upgrade outdated technology, expand Wi-Fi access, including Wi-Fi hotspots, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and fund groundbreaking digital literacy programs. Losing them means that libraries, particularly those in underserved and rural areas, struggle to keep pace with technological advancement. The impact on residents, especially vulnerable populations, is direct and is devastating. Without adequate funding, libraries may be forced to reduce operating hours, scale back training programs, or limit access to high-speed internet. This disproportionately affects people who rely on libraries as their primary or sole resource for connectivity. And I know there are people who don't believe that that's the case. But then you probably haven't been in your local library, so we shouldn't be listening to you anyway. Because if you went into your local library, you would see like what I see in most libraries. They are packed to the brim with people. Every computer machine has a butt in the seat. People need those resources. So students who don't have home internet may find themselves unable to complete homework assignments, especially if their university or their college is closed for the holidays, and or they don't have the transportation to even get to the school, because sometimes these colleges and universities are not as conveniently located depending upon where the student goes to school at. And if they don't have access to the internet at home, I don't know if you've ever tried to do your homework on your phone, but that's hard. So job seekers depending on library computers to search and apply for work face future barriers and further barriers. Seniors learning to adapt to an increasing digital world are certainly going to be left behind. Our homeless, our veterans, the most vulnerable of us in community who rely on libraries being open, being available, and providing the resources for connectivity and other things. If they don't have the resources to do the things that they provide typically and have to scale back, then we're going to see some harm come to our communities. Additionally, the uncertainty about funding, it disrupts the stability and efficacy of library services. Libraries cannot plan long-term programs or make significant investments in technological infrastructure if grant funds are subject to clawbacks. Again, this unpredictability hampers progress and undermines the trust communities placed in these institutions to begin with to bridge the digital divide. We have to do something about that. And I don't know what that thing is. We're still figuring it out in Cook County with this pilot project that we're going to be launching soon, very soon. We have to figure out what to do to support and sustain our libraries. But here are a few recommendations for those who are looking for things to do as we try to figure out what are the best solutions. Here are some ways that you can help. Advocate for library funding. Talk to your mayor or your village manager or whomever is the leader over your municipality. Talk to them about how libraries need more money, need more funding. So contact your local, your state, your federal representatives to express your support for library funding. Highlight how libraries provide critical access to technology, internet, and training for underserved communities. Use your social media voices, because I know y'all out there talking about things. You may be like me, you may not be talking about much, but I'm trying. I am trying to be better on that platform, on those platforms. So use your social media, your community meetings, or petitions to share how libraries impact lives and why funding initiatives through IMLS and other places are vital. Donate financially or offer supplies. Consider making a financial contribution to your local library. Most local libraries have like Friends of the Library, where you can donate books, you can donate money, you can donate supplies. Even the smallest donation can make a big difference in keeping programs and technology accessible. If you can't donate money, ask your library if they accept supplies or gently use laptops or tablets or printers, which can help expand resources available to patrons. The third thing is to volunteer your time and expertise. See, you a genius. You a genius. I can see you out there being the genius and doing things and knowing things. So volunteer your time and expertise to your libraries. Libraries often need volunteers to support programs or maintain daily operations. If you have an expertise in technology or teaching, offer to lead digital literacy workshops or help patrons with basic skills. Volunteering helps libraries stretch their resources while building a stronger sense of community. You can raise awareness. Educate others about the roles of libraries and their role in playing to bridge the digital divide. So if you got you a dinner party happening, a backyard barbecue, talk about libraries. Okay, I know you feel like, well, maybe I don't want to talk about libraries with my friends. Yes, you do. I can see it. I can see your heart bursting through this screen. You want to talk about libraries with your friends. If you are going to the Sky game like I'm going today, guess what? I'm going to find 5 friends and talk about libraries. I'm going to be in the washroom washing my hands and be like, hey, do you have a library card? Do you know that libraries and how they're funded is based on utilization? And if you don't have a library card, that means that's one less count that they can count on in reference to advocating for funding. See, that's going to happen today, right? So raise awareness. Use your voice in places and spaces that you may not think would be the place to have a conversation about libraries. I guarantee you that that's the place, because everybody that I talk to about libraries then shares back with me a library story or a library moment or something about their kids in libraries. So raise awareness. Support library-friendly policy. So staying informed in your community around the library-related policies and programs is crucial. Encourage the restoration and the protection of grants that support organizations that advocate for libraries, such as the American Library Association. Or in Cook County, we have RAILs, reaching across Illinois library systems. And there's also Heartland systems in Illinois. So vote for leaders and policies that prioritize equitable access to education and technology. If your elected is running and they haven't said anything about the libraries, ask them. You can participate in fundraisers or crowdsourcing. A lot of times libraries hold book sales or fundraising drives or online campaigns to help address budget gaps. Support those efforts, but by not only providing the immediate resources, but spreading the word. Share. It takes nothing to share. Sharing is caring, especially on social media. If you don't want to be like super active in your advocacy, you can be passively active by just retweeting, resharing, reposting. It takes 1 second. I've even done it, and I ain't even on the socials like that, but I do it as much as possible because I feel like if I can reshare and it makes it into someone else's network algorithm, and that helps a library or that helps a person or that helps an organization, then my little 1 second reshare was worth the effort. So y'all do that too, okay? Collaborate with local businesses and organizations. If you own or work with a local business, consider forming partnerships with the libraries. They're partnership friendly. Trust me. Businesses can sponsor programs, donate equipment, or host community events that promote digital skills and resources to expand the reach of library services. If you are a local business owner, have your meetings at the libraries. Get the people out the office and take them over to the library and host a meeting. That's how we continue to support our library ecosystem. And use your library. Okay, I know it's easy to download the books on the Kindle. I do that too. But I also love to hold a good library book. I like a physical book that I can bring with me and keep it inside my bag. And when I'm on the train, taking my commutes to my office, get a couple chapters in. So one of the simplest ways to support libraries is to use them. Visit your library Attend programs, borrow materials, and utilize their technology. Ensure that every person in your home has a library card. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Make sure that everyone in your home has a library card. Increased usage shows policymakers and community leaders that libraries are valuable and a necessary resource, and it's part of their budgeting algorithm. So if they don't have enough patrons via the library cards, they don't have anything to count. So get you a library card. Every person in your home, tell all your friends. When you go to a wedding, ask everybody at the wedding, at your table, do they have a library card? And tell them that you watched this podcast and you learned that if you don't have a library card, that means that there may be resources that are not going to be directed to your local library. I'm telling you, it makes for good conversation over coffee, tea, wedding cake, barbecue ribs. Trust me, I've done it. So by taking these actions, supporters can help libraries remain beacons of opportunity and innovators in our space, ensuring digital inclusion and equitable access for all. Every step that you take makes a difference in preserving this vital community resources. So we're going to round out this episode. I want to thank you for joining another episode of Digital Determinants and in exploring with me this incredible story of resilience, innovation, and community. Libraries, as we know and we learned, are far more than buildings. They are bridges to opportunity, beacons of hope, and powerful vehicles for equity. From their profound impact during the Great Migration to their essential role today in tackling the digital divide, libraries have consistently transformed lives and strengthened communities. But their impact isn't bound to history or something distant. It's here, it's now, and it really is in our hands to preserve, protect, and to uplift them. Look around your own community, you'll find a library working to empower someone to learn, connect, or grow, if you're lucky, because again, every community doesn't have a library. So whether it's a child that's learning code or a senior mastering email or someone logging in for an interview, because people actually do interviews at the library. Libraries are critical in ensuring no one is left behind. So this is a call to action. Certainly there's a story around the role libraries played in Great Migration, but this is also a call to action. Advocate for funding for our libraries. Donate your time or your resources. Use your voice to raise awareness about the indispensable role that libraries play in fostering inclusion, honoring culture, and bridging gaps that would otherwise not be present. Support your local libraries, because when you do, you invest in the future. The future for us, the future for you, the future for others. So thank you for listening to episode 7 of the Digital Determinants podcast. Together, you and me, because we in this together now that you watched or listened to this episode, we can ensure that libraries remain at the heart of our communities, creating a world where equity, access, and opportunity are available to everyone. Until next time, remember, change begins with knowledge, and knowledge lives just beyond your local library doors. And as always, stay connected.